Target Tehran by Yonah Bob. Introduction of Target Tehran. The introduction of Target Tehran sets the stage for a gripping, high-stakes story that combines intelligence operations, diplomacy, and existential threats. It immediately places the reader in the midst of one of the most pressing issues of modern geopolitics, preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The authors open by making it clear that this is not just a theoretical threat. For Israel, the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran is a life-or-death concern. The book begins by highlighting how Israel has fought a shadow war for decades against Iran's nuclear ambitions. This war has been conducted largely out of the public eye, through covert operations, espionage, sabotage, cyber warfare, and precision assassinations, often with Mossad, Israel's elite intelligence agency, at the helm. The introduction emphasizes that these missions were not only aimed at buying time, but at creating lasting damage to Iran's nuclear program while avoiding a full-scale war. Chapter 1: The Heist. Chapter 1 of Target Tehran opens with one of the most dramatic and daring intelligence operations in modern history, Mossad's 2018 raid on a secret Iranian nuclear archive in Tehran. Known simply as the Heist, this mission set the stage for the rest of the book, revealing the boldness, reach, and precision of Israeli intelligence efforts to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions. The objective: stealing Iran's nuclear secrets. Israeli intelligence had long suspected that Iran was hiding critical documents detailing its nuclear weapons program even after it signed the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), which was meant to curb such activities. Mossad eventually identified a nondescript warehouse in southern Tehran that housed a treasure trove of top-secret nuclear files, blueprints, plans, and documents from Project Ahmad, Iran's covert nuclear weapons development program. The goal was simple but extremely risky: break into the heavily guarded facility, extract the documents, and get them out of the country, all without alerting Iranian forces. The operation, a real-life spy thriller. The chapter describes in vivid detail how dozens of Mossad agents, working inside Iran, carried out this extraordinary raid in the early hours of January 31, 2018. They had just 6.5 hours, the narrowest window between the departure of security guards and the facility's next shift. They used specialized torches to cut into dozens of safes, and loaded over 100,000 documents and digital files weighing nearly half a ton into vehicles. Then came the tense escape. Mossad had to smuggle the material across Iran's borders, likely through multiple means and routes, evading the vast security apparatus of the Islamic Republic. According to Israeli officials, none of the operatives were captured, and all safely exited the country. It was an unprecedented feat of modern espionage. What the files revealed: the seized documents proved Iran had lied about its nuclear program. Despite its commitments under the JCPOA, the files showed Iran had a well-structured plan to build nuclear weapons, continued preservation of nuclear knowledge and capability, detailed designs for nuclear warheads and delivery systems, concealed its military nuclear intentions for years. This gave Israel the evidence it needed to publicly expose Iran, and eventually helped persuade the Trump administration to withdraw from the nuclear deal. The global impact. After the heist, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu presented the findings in a now famous PowerPoint press conference, shocking the international community. While critics questioned the deal's merits, these revelations reshaped the global discourse on Iran's trustworthiness and renewed pressure on international bodies like the IAEA. The documents also validated years of Israeli concerns and provided the Mossad with deeper insight into Iran's nuclear progress and infrastructure. Intelligence, planning, and bravery. The chapter celebrates the meticulous planning and innovation behind the raid. It showcases the Mossad's evolution into an agency capable of deep penetration operations even within enemy capitals. It also highlights a shift in Israeli strategy, from targeted assassinations like those of Iranian nuclear scientists to intelligence coups that reveal secrets without bloodshed, and with maximum political impact. Chapter 2: Divine Intervention. Chapter 2 of Target Tehran dives into the spiritual, ideological, and religious elements that have shaped Iran's nuclear ambitions and Israel's fierce opposition. The chapter is titled, Divine Intervention, to emphasize the religious motivations and apocalyptic worldview that drive key figures in the Iranian regime, especially the belief that acquiring nuclear power is not just a strategic move but a sacred mission tied to Shiite Islamic ideology. 1. Religious motivation behind Iran's nuclear drive. The authors explore how certain factions within Iran's leadership, particularly the ultra-hardliners in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC), view nuclear weapons not only as a deterrent or military asset but as part of a divinely ordained plan. Some deeply believe that developing nuclear capability will help prepare the way for the return of the Mahdi, a messianic figure in Shiite Islam. This apocalyptic belief fuels a religious zeal that makes traditional deterrence strategies less effective or predictable. Iran's leadership, especially under figures like former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, often reference divine will and Islamic prophecy in public speeches. This chapter explains how such beliefs make the nuclear threat even more complex. It's not only political, it's theological. The danger is that decisions may not always be based on rational cost-benefit analysis, but on faith-based objectives. 2. Mossad's concern over ideological extremism. From Israel's perspective, this ideological extremism makes Iran an unusually dangerous adversary. Unlike other countries that develop nuclear capabilities to maintain power or national defense, like Pakistan or India, Iran is perceived as willing to use these weapons aggressively or pass them to proxies, motivated by religious justification. The chapter outlines how this concern raises the stakes for Israeli intelligence and military planners. Israeli officials and Mossad agents see the potential for divine intervention, is framed by Iran's hardliners, as a rationalization for potentially irrational behavior. In this view, even mutually assured destruction (MAD) is not a reliable deterrent, because some factions in Iran might view martyrdom and massive loss as a path to religious fulfillment. 3. Conflicting internal beliefs within Iran. The chapter also highlights internal conflict within Iran. Not all leaders are extremists, some are pragmatic, fearing the international backlash and economic ruin that a nuclear weapons program could bring. However, the mix of ideologues and moderates creates an unpredictable political landscape, which further complicates foreign policy and intelligence assessments. The authors emphasize that Israel and its intelligence agencies must constantly assess who is really in charge in Tehran, and whether the pragmatic camp can contain the more apocalyptic voices. 4. How belief shapes military strategy. This belief system isn't limited to speeches, it influences Iran's proxy strategies, support for groups like Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, and the rhetoric of annihilating Israel. The chapter outlines how Israel interprets these developments not as bluster, but as potential steps toward a religiously motivated endgame. In response, Mossad and Israeli defense forces believe they are not just confronting a state but fighting a religious movement armed with national power. This view leads to more aggressive, preemptive tactics, especially when time-sensitive intelligence indicates imminent progress in Iran's nuclear facilities. Chapter 3. Tell your friends you can use our airspace. This chapter shifts the narrative from religious ideology to the covert geopolitical chessboard, highlighting the quiet but crucial alliances Israel formed to prepare for any potential military strike against Iran's nuclear program. Specifically, it focuses on how Israel built regional cooperation, particularly with Sunni Arab states, to secure strategic advantages, like the use of airspace, for missions deep inside Iran. The strategic dilemma: how to strike Iran. One of Israel's main challenges in planning a potential strike against Iran's nuclear facilities is distance and geography. Iran lies far beyond Israel's immediate neighborhood, and a direct strike would require aircraft to fly more than 1,000 miles, past hostile or neutral nations. Without in-flight refueling or regional access, such a mission becomes logistically risky. This led Israeli defense planners and Mossad operatives to pursue covert partnerships with countries that share a common enemy in Iran, mainly Sunni Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and others. Enemy of my enemy, unlikely alliances. Chapter 3 delves into how shared fear of Iran drove secret diplomacy and intelligence coordination between Israel and certain Arab nations, even before formal peace agreements like the Abraham Accords. Although these countries publicly criticized Israel or remained silent about cooperation, privately, they permitted or at least did not obstruct Israeli planning. One such example includes Saudi Arabia's unspoken nod to Israeli aircraft potentially crossing its airspace in the event of a strike on Iran. While the Saudis never formally announced such cooperation, back-channel messages suggested a willingness to look the other way. One quote referenced in the chapter is the origin of the chapter's title, "Tell your friends you can use our airspace," which an unnamed Arab official reportedly conveyed to Israeli intermediaries. This tacit approval came not out of friendship, but from shared strategic interests. Both Israel and these Arab states feared a nuclear Iran would dominate the Middle East, export revolution, and destabilize monarchies. Operational considerations and contingency planning. The chapter outlines how Israel's military and intelligence communities spent years conducting aerial drills, refueling simulations, and stealth route mapping. This required understanding not only geography but also political sensitivities, ensuring that Israeli actions would not expose or embarrass their quiet allies. Israeli jets flying over Arab airspace had to avoid detection by local radar or get clearance that was unofficial and deniable. The Mossad played a role in negotiating, securing, and protecting these covert arrangements, often through third parties or intermediaries from allied intelligence agencies like the CIA or Jordanian services. The role of the United States. The United States is also a key player in this chapter. While Washington has been reluctant to endorse a military strike on Iran, it has consistently supported Israel's right to defend itself. American influence helped smooth over cooperation between Israel and Arab partners, especially when tensions threatened to derail the quiet coordination. In return, Israel shared intelligence on Iran's activities with both the U.S. and its regional allies, strengthening a network of real-time surveillance and early warning systems. The fear of a nuclear-armed Iran was so deep that it broke through decades of hostility between Israel and the Arab world. Mossad's silent diplomacy. The Mossad acted not just as a spy agency but as a diplomatic arm, forging shadow agreements and trust-based relationships in hostile territories. In countries like Oman, Bahrain, and even Qatar, Mossad operatives or emissaries quietly laid the groundwork for cooperation that could be activated if and when Israel decided to take military action. These efforts illustrate how Israel's strategy extended beyond espionage and sabotage. It was also about building a web of regional alignment, not officially acknowledged, but strong enough to create an informal coalition ready to counter Iran if diplomacy failed. Chapter 4 Changing Circumstances. This chapter highlights how shifts in global politics, regional alliances, and technological capabilities reshaped the battle over Iran's nuclear ambitions. It explores how external and internal changes in the Middle East, including leadership transitions, diplomatic moves, and evolving public perceptions, altered the environment in which both Israel and Iran operate. A shifting global landscape. The authors examine how the global response to Iran's nuclear program changed between the Obama and Trump administrations. Under Obama, diplomacy and the 2015 Iran nuclear deal (JCPOA) were prioritized. However, with President Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018, the U.S. adopted a maximum pressure strategy that aligned more closely with Israel's hardline stance. This reversal emboldened Israel, as it no longer had to tread lightly to avoid angering its main ally. At the same time, Iran became more aggressive, resuming uranium enrichment and threatening regional stability through its proxy forces. Middle East realignment. One of the most significant developments discussed in this chapter is the normalization of relations between Israel and several Arab countries through the Abraham Accords 2020. These new relationships, especially with the UAE and Bahrain, dramatically shifted the regional calculus. For decades, Israel was diplomatically isolated in the region. Now, shared concerns over Iran's threat led Sunni Arab states and Israel to quietly and then publicly cooperate in intelligence, defense, and technology. This realignment meant Israel could now publicly engage in regional security planning and gain strategic depth for any potential future action against Iran, a luxury it never had before. Iran's growing capabilities and internal struggles. While Israel gained allies, Iran continued advancing its nuclear and missile programs, despite sanctions and sabotage efforts. At the same time, Iran faced domestic turmoil, economic collapse, protests, and discontent, which complicated its own strategic decisions. However, this internal unrest also made the regime more paranoid and aggressive, pushing it to double down on its nuclear pursuits as a symbol of strength and resistance. Israel's strategic calculations shift. With changing circumstances, Israel recalibrated its strategy. It increased cyber attacks, economic warfare, and covert operations. It strengthened Mossad's footprint across the region and beyond. It invested heavily in long-range strike capabilities, including aircraft, refueling systems, and bunker-busting bombs. The authors point out that these changes weren't isolated. They were part of a broader pivot in Israeli national security thinking, from wait and warn to strike and prevent. Narrative and influence. A key insight in this chapter is that public narrative matters. Israel began using media, diplomacy, and intelligence leaks to shape international opinion. By publicizing operations like the Tehran nuclear archive raid and the assassinations of key nuclear scientists, Israel put pressure on Iran while rallying global sympathy. This psychological warfare complemented physical operations and helped undermine Iran's credibility on the world stage. Chapter 5 Code Name Callan. Chapter 5 focuses on one of the most enigmatic and legendary figures in Israel's modern intelligence community, Mossad chief Yossi Cohen, whose codename was Callan. This chapter dives into his rise through the ranks, his bold leadership style, and his strategic role in some of the most important and daring operations Israel has conducted against Iran. Who is Callan? Yossi Cohen, dubbed Callan, during his Mossad career, was not just a career spy but a visionary strategist. Described as charming, disciplined, and highly intelligent, Cohen was handpicked by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to lead the Mossad at a critical time when Israel was confronting Iran's growing nuclear threat. Under Cohen, Mossad didn't merely react to threats, it went on the offensive, transforming into a dynamic, risk-taking organization that could penetrate deep into enemy territory, including Tehran itself. Strategic mindset. Cohen's leadership was guided by two key principles. 1. Boldness over caution. He believed Mossad had to operate beyond traditional boundaries and with greater daring. 2. Theater and message. Every operation should not only achieve intelligence or security goals but also send a clear message to enemies and allies alike. He applied this mindset during the Tehran nuclear archive heist, and also in a string of assassinations and sabotage operations against Iran's nuclear program, many of which are believed to have been authorized and planned during his tenure. Intellectual approach to espionage. The chapter highlights Cohen's reputation as a thinking spy, someone who could analyze geopolitics, anticipate threats, and position Mossad as a tool of both covert action and diplomatic leverage. He saw Mossad not just as a cloak and dagger service, but as a strategic arm of Israeli policy. He also forged closer ties with Gulf Arab intelligence agencies, paving the way for eventual normalization agreements under the Abraham Accords. The impact of his operations. Several high-stakes missions during Cohen's leadership are alluded to in this chapter, including the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, Sabotage of key nuclear facilities like Natanz. Infiltration of Iran's intelligence networks. Each of these actions carried massive geopolitical risk, but also demonstrated Mossad's unmatched reach. Under Ilan, Mossad moved from defense to disruption, not just gathering intelligence, but shaping events. Political and public persona. Cohen's public profile also grew, rare for a Mossad chief. He cultivated ties with politicians, foreign leaders, and even appeared in the Israeli media. This blend of spycraft and statesmanship made him a unique figure in Israel's modern history. However, the chapter also notes that such visibility invited criticism and controversy, with some accusing him of being too close to politics and too interested in future leadership roles in Israel. Chapter 6: The Reveal. This chapter centers on one of Mossad's most astonishing intelligence operations, the theft and public exposure of Iran's secret nuclear archive. Known internally as the Tehran heist, this mission was not only a bold operational triumph, but also a strategic revelation designed to shift international opinion and reframe the Iran nuclear debate. The mission. In January 2018, Mossad agents infiltrated a highly secured warehouse in Tehran and extracted over 100,000 pages and files, physical and digital, containing classified information about Project Ahmad, Iran's previously undisclosed nuclear weapons program. The warehouse was under heavy surveillance. Yet, the Mossad team managed to break into a fortified facility, crack safes storing documents and disks, escape with the materials, all within 6 hours. This daring operation took months of planning, including surveillance, fake identities, and deep intelligence cooperation. Strategic impact. Rather than keeping the files secret, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly unveiled the archive in April 2018, in a widely broadcast presentation. Holding a stack of binders and CDs, Netanyahu declared, "Iran lied. This public reveal was designed for global psychological and diplomatic impact. To prove Iran had been secretly pursuing nuclear weapons. To justify the U.S. withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal which occurred shortly afterward. To rally international support for tougher action against Tehran." Contents of the archive. The files exposed. Blueprints for warhead design. Photos of missile-fitting experiments. Communications showing attempts to hide programs from international inspectors. Details about key scientists involved in the program. This treasure trove confirmed long-standing Israeli and Western suspicions: Iran had misled the world. Information warfare. The authors emphasize that the reveal was not just about intelligence, it was about narrative control. By going public, Israel put Iran on the defensive, forcing it to explain past lies. Strengthened global support for its campaign of sabotage and sanctions. Demonstrated Mossad's reach, instilling fear among Iranian leaders and scientists. It was information warfare at its most strategic and theatrical, blending espionage, diplomacy, and media optics. Operational genius. The chapter highlights Mossad's precision and discipline. Every safe was mapped out in advance. The escape route was planned to the minute. The intelligence was extracted, copied, and analyzed rapidly. Mossad even used cutting-edge facial recognition and AI tools to identify scientists from the archive for future operations. What came next? This operation gave Israel a list of targets for future assassinations and sabotage. The files identified the individuals keeping Iran's nuclear program alive, some of whom would soon become targets in the shadow war that followed. It also deepened the bond between Mossad and U.S. intelligence under the Trump administration, aligning both nations' strategies on Iran. Chapter 7: An Alliance Emerges. This chapter explores a major turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics, the formation of a quiet but powerful alliance between Israel and key Arab nations, especially in the Gulf, united by a common goal: to counter Iran. It unpacks how years of behind-the-scenes intelligence sharing, military coordination, and shared threat perception laid the groundwork for this alliance to move from the shadows to the spotlight, culminating in the historic Abraham Accords. Shared threat. Iran. Iran's growing influence, its nuclear ambitions, proxy networks like Hezbollah and the Houthis, and regional destabilization, became a mutual concern for Israel and Sunni Arab states like the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. Though these countries had no official diplomatic relations with Israel at the time, their security and intelligence agencies began cooperating covertly. This cooperation included sharing intelligence about Iranian weapons movements, joint cyber operations to disrupt Iranian infrastructure, monitoring Iranian proxies across the Middle East, Mossad's quiet diplomacy. Under Mossad Director Yossi Cohen, Israeli intelligence took on a diplomatic role, facilitating secret meetings between Israeli and Gulf Arab officials, trust-building missions aimed at showing that Israel could be a reliable partner, exchanges of intelligence technologies, including surveillance tools and cybersecurity capabilities. Cohen's personal diplomacy, discretion, and understanding of regional politics earned him respect and influence in these traditionally hostile territories. From covert to overt, the Abraham Accords. The culmination of these growing ties was the 2020 Abraham Accords, U.S. brokered agreements that normalized relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, later, Morocco and Sudan. These agreements were unthinkable a decade prior and marked a paradigm shift in the Middle East. Key drivers included shared hostility toward Iran, U.S. encouragement and strategic guarantees, the realization that economic and technological cooperation with Israel offered benefits. The chapter argues that the Iran threat catalyzed an entirely new regional alliance system, one no longer divided strictly along the Arab-Israeli line, but increasingly shaped by Sunni Israel versus Shiite-Iranian dynamics. Strategic and operational benefits. The alliance had tangible consequences. Improved intelligence sharing on Iran's nuclear and terrorist networks. Expanded airspace access for Israeli aircraft. Greater freedom of movement for Mossad and IDF units across the region. Economic ties that boosted Israeli innovation and Gulf investments. Perhaps most importantly, the alliance sent a clear message to Tehran. You are now surrounded by adversaries who are no longer divided by religion, but united by purpose. Chapter 8 Death of the Shadow Commander. Chapter 8, titled, Death of the Shadow Commander, centers on the highly significant assassination of Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, known as the orchestrator of Iran's shadow operations across the Middle East. His death marked a critical escalation in Israel's covert campaign against Tehran. Who was the shadow commander? Brig. Gen. Mohammad Reza Zahedi served as a senior commander in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) and was deeply involved in orchestrating Iran's regional military strategy. His responsibilities included funding, training, and deploying proxies and militias, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq and Yemen, to extend Iran's influence and create strategic depth. He rarely appeared in public, earning him the nickname, Shadow Commander. His leadership was instrumental in Iran's asymmetric warfare tactics. The operation to eliminate him. Israel's intelligence community, primarily Mossad and the IDF's intelligence arm, spent years gathering intelligence to locate him. The decision to assassinate him was strategic. It aimed both to disrupt Iran's proxy chain of command and to send a strong signal about consequences for orchestrating attacks against Israel and its allies. The operation involved careful surveillance of Zahedi's routines and meeting places, coordination with covert operatives in the region to identify a secure moment of vulnerability. A strike tailored to minimize collateral damage, while maximizing psychological impact. Impact on Iran's military influence. Zahedi's removal had a dual effect. 1. Operational disruption. His death temporarily disorganized IRGC networks, slowing deployments and communications. Proxy groups lost a key strategic planner, creating gaps during critical times. 2. Psychological shock. It demonstrated that Israel could reach high-ranking IRGC commanders, no matter how deeply embedded they were within Iran's network. This caused unease within the Iranian leadership about their safety outside Iran's borders. A message with regional ripples. The chapter underscores that this was not only a tactical win but also a strategic message. To Iran, high-ranking leaders are not immune, even at home. To proxy forces, future leaders may hesitate before planning attacks, knowing Israel can retaliate decisively. To the West and allies, it illustrated Israel's resolve to defend against threats crossing international boundaries. Preparation and precision. The operation's success was the result of meticulous planning. Satellite and human intelligence identified Zahidi's habits and routes. Technological edge and stealth precision were used to ensure a clean operation. Emergency and exit plans were in place to ensure the strike team could evade Iranian countermeasures. Repercussions and ramifications. In the aftermath, the IRGC reassessed its procedures and tightened internal security. Iran publicly denounced the assassination and vowed retaliation, though system-wide IRGC overhauls followed. Proxy groups reacted with statements but offered limited capability for immediate counterstrikes.